So from the diamonds conversation in Botswana and Namibia and Angola, we come to DRC. There's a news that dropped this week that the United States tried to block a copper mine in DRC, block Chinese business from buying that copper mine. So when I saw this news, it made me think and think hard. Here's the thing: if you've been following geopolitics, you know that there's currently tension between the US, China, and Russia on the geopolitics stage. So China has asserted itself as a world power. China is a world power. So China has asserted itself as a world power. Russia has come back on the scene. There was a time Russia was a world power under the USSR. Then it went through a really dark period. But now Russia under Vladimir Putin has asserted itself again as a world power. So it's a formidable player. And United States, that was the absolute world power for several decades, seems to be its influence seems to be dwindling. So it's trying to counter any threats to its global hegemony, like anything that's threatening it from being number one. So that's the geopolitical game that has been playing. So one of the effects of this is that we are going to see the US try to counter in several episodes, for example, of their mandatory. I mentioned that says that they need to counter Russia and China's propaganda in Africa. So therefore, they need to give us more American propaganda. Well, so we're going to see more things like this, where the United States is countering Russia and China in different areas around the world. So this story now of US blocking, attempting to block China's purchase of a copper mine in DRC is really because United States does not want these rare earth minerals, particularly the rare earth minerals needed for today's the whole green agenda and the rest of it. So particularly this kind of rare earth minerals, US is trying to stop China from being a big player in that industry, which China already is, by the way, because for example, with the electric cars, China is already has overtaken the world. So that's what's happened. Now, I want to read a quote from Financial Times about the situation. I'll read the quote, then get into what I want to say about it. So the quote, according to Financial Times, this blocking of China, this stop trying to stop China purchasing a mine in DRC. According to Financial Times, the move is part of Washington's efforts to improve access to metals for US friendly companies amid increasingly fierce competition between the West and China for control of the minerals needed for clean energy infrastructure. Listen, one, US wants to improve access for US friendly companies, underlined. US friendly companies. The next thing I want you to see, this whole thing is amid increasing fierce competition between the West, listen, between the West and China for control of the minerals needed for clean energy infrastructure. Control of the minerals. Where are many of these minerals situated? In Africa. So this whole geopolitical game is playing where? Over Africa. Over Africa. They are saying they want to control minerals needed for clean energy infrastructure. United States wants to put these minerals in the hands of US friendly companies to control. Meanwhile, the minerals are in your country. They're in DRC. This one is not in DRC. They're in DRC. They're in South Africa. They're in Nigeria. They are in Ethiopia. They are in Egypt. They are all across the continent. They're in Botswana. Like our previous segment, we spoke about Botswana and the diamond industry. So these minerals are all across Africa. And they are talking about controlling it. And they're not mentioning you. They're not asking you the part you play. Then nobody's asking you, not United States, not China. They're not asking you the role you play. Understand the way this geopolitical game is played. It's for control, for the minerals under your feet. And nobody tried to consult you to say, okay, what do you think about it? Very interesting. It reminds me of the attempted coup in Bolivia last week or 2 weeks, well, just either last week or 2 weeks ago. So there was an attempted coup. It failed. But when the president of Bolivia was talking about it, one of the things he said he knows that the attempted coup to remove him from office was because of Bolivia's rich lithium reserves. I believe Bolivia is number one lithium producer in the world. So this coup was to remove his government because certain people were looking at it like his government was not favorable to them so that they can control Bolivia's lithium. His government was not being favorable. It was favoring some other people. So they tried to remove him so that they can bring in somebody who would favor him, who would favor them rather, in advancing their quest to control minerals. Let me buttress this point with something that happened some weeks ago. So a few weeks ago, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, I believe he's from Carolina. Yes, South Carolina. He was on a network in the United States talking about the minerals in Ukraine. And something that he said struck me. So he said boldly on international TV that Ukraine has trillions of dollars worth of minerals. And the United States should not let those minerals get into the control of Russia because Russia will share with China. Nobody was talking about the Ukrainians. Nobody was, sometimes when you see things like this, especially things that this geopolitical game, you would think that at the very least, the people of the country should be a consideration. But I want to tell you today that the people of the countries are not a consideration when they are thinking of how they become the biggest players in green because anybody who can control this green energy game now is the person is that country is set. So when they're thinking of how to control this green energy game, nobody is thinking about the people. So Lindsey Graham went on international TV to say that United States needs to make sure that it stays with Ukraine because it needs to control the resources of Ukraine so that these resources don't get into the hands of Russia, who will then share with China. I'll play the video for you to watch. I wish I can find it. If I can find it, I'll play it for you to watch.
What did Trump do to get the weapons flowing? He created a loan system. They're sitting on 10 to 12 trillion dollars of critical minerals in Ukraine. They could be the richest country in all of Europe. I don't want to give that money and those assets to Putin to share with China. If we help Ukraine now, they can become the best business partner we ever dreamed of. But they're sitting on a gold mine to give Putin 10 or 12 trillion dollars of critical minerals that
Yep.
he will share with China is ridiculous.
I want. So when you see things like this, many times when you see things like this, it's a geopolitical game. Nobody is thinking about the people of the country. All the countries, these big global players like US, Russia, China, Europe, and the rest of them, they're looking for how to assert themselves in fact, to ensure that they continue to be the center of of global affairs. How is it? Before I move on to what I wanted to say. So Ukraine now, Lindsey Graham said Ukraine has trillions of dollars worth of minerals, which is true. But even with trillions of dollars worth of minerals, Ukraine is one of the poorest countries in Europe. And it's not just because of the war. Even before the war, Ukraine has been one of the poorest countries in Europe. Even if it had trillions of dollars worth of minerals. The same thing with the DRC. The DRC is is according to several experts, DRC is the richest country in the world when it comes to mineral resources. It's the richest in the world. Yet, the DRC is one of the poorest countries in the world. How can you be the richest country with minerals, critical minerals that the world needs in today's world? You have abundance of it. Yet, Yet, you're one of the poorest countries in the world. A lot of these things I've said it several times, these are residues of colonialism, of Africa being just a place to extract raw materials, which is why we need to change it. We don't have to wait for our government because sometimes your government might have a different agenda. The government may have a very different agenda. So, but because it affects us directly, I've told you now. I mentioned it just a few seconds ago, a while ago. I mentioned it that when this geopolitical game is being played, and on many occasions, they're not thinking of the people of the country. They are thinking of their own standing. their own standing on the global stage. So the question now is, we in Africa, what are we going to do about it? Because we cannot be relying on just our government. A different respective government may have their own thing they are doing, but we are the people, with the people. It is in our, it's for our benefit to decide what we want to do with Africa and the resources and the minerals that we have. It's in our own good to decide it. Because I'm thinking of the audacity. But there's a kind of audacity you can have when you have been the center of the world for several decades. Because I'm thinking, United States left its country, thousands of miles left its country to stop China, a Chinese company, from buying a mine in the DRC. Why? Because China is not US friend. So they want to put this critical infrastructure, these critical minerals in the hands of companies and countries that are favorite companies from countries that are friends of the United States. And all this game is played on top of your head in Africa. Now, I'm not fighting the US, so everybody is going to do what is in their interest. What is in Africa, now it is up to us to decide what is in Africa's interest. Because if we say, oh, China is our friend, we're only going to follow China, or Russia is our friend, we're only going to follow Russia, or the United States is our friend, we're only going to follow the US, you then sell out your country to these other players. What then happens to your own country and the people in your country? So I'm not saying you should take sides. I'm saying that we should decide who we want to sell our minerals to. We should decide who we want to partner with. We partner with the US, we partner with China, we partner with Russia, we partner with Europe, we partner with Latin America, with everybody. But in as much as we are doing all these things, so let's not forget that the target is dominance in this era of clean energy. And many of the minerals needed for this clean energy transition and many of the minerals needed for the clean energy infrastructure are in the continent of Africa, is in your country and in my country. So what's the question? How is this in Africa's interest? That is what we should be asking ourselves. It's not just about selling our mines and our minerals to outsiders. How do don't we want to be players in this thing? I'm saying that Africa doesn't even, we don't need to be just a place for extraction and exploitation of minerals. Enough. We're not going to be that anymore. We are not going to be that. Africa will not be that anymore. We too, we want to play. Is it a bad thing? Is it a bad thing for the black skin to play in this game? Hmm? It's not a bad thing. We know what they're using our cobalt to do. We know. We know what they're using our copper to do. We know what they're using our iron ore to do. We know what they're using our diamonds to do. We know what they're using our gas and natural gas to do. We know. So we too, we need to begin to play in this game. The geopolitical game is not foreign to we in Africa. It's not foreign to us in Africa. It's not. Our minds can comprehend it. We know they're using it to do electric cars. So we too we are going to create our own electric cars. We know they're using it to make mobile phones. We too we are going to make our own mobile phones. We know they're using it to make batteries. Why can't we create our own batteries? Why can't we create our own batteries? Is there something wrong with made in Nigeria battery or made in South Africa battery? Is there something wrong with it? So when you see things like this, you should not just be thinking of, oh no, we are going to sell to only China. No, 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 we are going to play. I want Africa, we need to become players in this game. The game is not foreign to Africans. It's not foreign to the black skin. Our brains can comprehend it. It's not foreign to us. I read it to you just now from the Financial Times that US is looking to put these infrastructures within these critical minerals within US friendly countries for control. The word the Financial Times used was control. Our own resources is our own. Is our own. So what am I saying? I'm saying we should begin to play in this game. The game is not foreign to us. We know. We understand what they're using it to make. We understand. Have you been to China? You've seen what China is doing with with electric cars. We too. Let us have an agenda. And like I know, as I'm saying it, most people are probably thinking, oh, let us just make it. It's just because our government. If we keep giving ourselves excuse for government, we'll not get anything done. Since I was born, I've been hearing government, 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 government. And so if we now we have who have come on the scene at this point, if we keep giving holding the government responsible, we would still we will, our children are going to inherit this same nonsense. So that our children don't inherit the nonsense we inherited from our parents. let us say, okay, if our government has not been doing that, let's assume they're going to keep acting like this. How are we individuals, we the public, how can we come into play? That's how we need to begin to think in Africa. We need to begin to think about becoming players in this game. Because who says that Africa, the only thing we are good for is to export raw materials? Who said it? Who said it? I don't see any law anywhere. If an outsider, maybe a country outside, decides that okay, this is what we are going to use Africa for, have we agreed that that is what we are going to be used for? They can say they want to use Africa as a place for just exploiting minerals. We would say no, we are not going to be for just exploiting minerals. We can insist that that's not that the game will play. So then we then begin to think, how can we come in? Quite right. Russia has really advanced, and China has really advanced, and the United States has advanced. But that does not mean we cannot be. I mentioned in the last segment how the whole world, Antwerp was the center of the diamond game. But India has become the center of the diamond game. Dubai has become center of the diamond game. Why? Because people thought outside the box. It wasn't just about the government. Individuals came in to see how they can play in this thing. So I'm advocating for we in Africa to begin to do that. These are our minerals. The diamond belongs to us. The copper is ours. The copper mine is probably in your village. The lithium mine is probably in your village. The oil wells are probably in your village. The natural gas locations are probably in your village. The sapphires and diamonds and rubies in your village. It's in your village. It's in your country. So who says you cannot become a player in this thing? So that's what I want us to in this segment. That's what I want us to do. I want this segment. That's what I want to convey. The message I want to pass is that we need to begin to think about how we can become players. I mentioned it in the last segment that we did when we were talking about Botswana and the whole diamond G7 diamond band something. I mentioned it. How um why can't we? Must we wait for Cadbury and Mars to come and buy our cacao? Why can't we use our own cacao? Why can't we? Because if we leave it the way it is, the global system, the way it's set up, is not set up to benefit Africa. It's not. Don't deceive yourself. The way the global economy is played is not set up to benefit Africa because we've had centuries of colonization where Africa was just a place to collect raw materials. That was what we had. So we need to change that system. But we cannot be waiting for them outside because it benefits them. Because if they just get raw materials from us, it's cheap. It's really cheap for them. But it's not in our benefit. So when you see our interests and their interests are clashing like this, you will follow through in your own interests. Because, like I said, the global system is set up. The way it is set up is not set up to benefit Africa. Africa is just supposed to be the place to collect raw materials and go. It's not supposed to be the place to process it because you make more money when you process this thing to sell, when you sell out finished products. Let me give you an example. A few weeks ago, um the richest man, okay, yes, the richest man in Africa for a while, but right now I believe he has been unseated by somebody in South Africa. But Aliko Dangote, we all know that last year Aliko Dangote launched his refinery. The idea is supposed to be like Nigeria should no longer, in fact Africa should no longer be a place for just collecting oil. We also need to refine our oil and export finished products, which makes sense. That way Nigeria makes more money. But he said something a few weeks ago. He said he he spoke about an oil cartel, an oil cabal that has been trying to stifle I'm paraphrasing, that has been trying to stifle the growth of his country. Like for example, Nigeria normally Nigeria has oil. Nigeria is one of the largest producers of oil on the continent, in the world too. So Nigeria has a lot of oil, right? But a lot of crude oil. But Dangote, when you mention the cabal is stopping him. I'm paraphrasing, like I said, I don't want to go into the full details. The cabal is stopping the Dangote group from buying crude oil from Nigeria to refine and sell finished products. So instead, the Dangote refinery is buying crude oil from the United States. Why? Like I said, all these things are residue of colonialism. Does it make sense? A country, a business is resident in Nigeria, operates in Nigeria. The business is an oil refinery in Nigeria that has abundance of crude oil. instead of getting crude oil from the country where you operate, because it'll be cheaper for you. It's buying crude oil from the United States. Why? The oil cabal. And this oil cabal has it. And oil cabal, he said the players are both within the country, that is Nigeria, and outside the country. What I want to say is that this cabal has existed for centuries. Why? Because it is Africa's job is just to be a place to export raw materials, not a place to refine it, not a place to manufacture and produce finished goods. But if that is going to change, if that story of Africa is going to change, me and you would have to decide that we're not going to play that game. We have to decide by ourselves that we're not going to play that game. We are going to refine our minerals here. We are going to produce finished goods here. But we don't have to wait for our government. Learn from what India did with diamonds. We need to learn from what India did with diamonds and decide that we are going to use our minerals by ourselves. We are going to turn it to finished products by ourselves. We are going to export finished goods by ourselves. That is the only way. That is the only way to bring Africa out of poverty. So while the United States is stopping the DRC from selling copper mines to China because China is not US friend, let the DRC also remember that these minerals belong to the DRC. So the DRC needs to also find a way to play in that game beyond just a place to collect raw materials. And this lesson should move to other countries in Africa as well.